Hi, I'm Femi OK.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Today, the psychology of addictive behaviour. What drives compulsive behaviour and how do we fix it? So we have a little experiment that we're going to start off the conversation with. Malika can't wait, not.
Very excited.
All right, so we are going to ask you for 10 seconds, the next 10 seconds, to do absolutely nothing on TV. Starting from Malika.
Right now.
How do you feel? Did you make it?
I was a little fidgety myself. The question is, though, how do you feel at home? Did you have the urge to reach for something? Typically, in situations like that, I personally reach for my phone. For other people, it may be food, it may be gambling, it may be the internet, and it may be alcohol. Some people, it may even be work, and for that, I'm looking at Femi.
Oh, thank you very much, just dropping me in there. Yes, workaholism, that could possibly be an addiction. I definitely have that. There is a link, though, between distraction turning into compulsion and then addiction. So maybe what did you have to do in that 10 seconds? You had to do it. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And I guess I'm here to help us explain that. Right here in the US, in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, psychiatrist Judson Brewer is an expert on addiction and mindfulness. In Thailand, Tony Tan is a substance abuse and gambling addiction therapist at the Cabin Chiang Mai. That's a rehabilitation centre. In Cape Town, South Africa, Lisa Sonn is a recovering sugar and carbohydrate addict. And in London, Lavelle is an Al Jazeera English correspondent who underwent a digital detox as part of the documentary My Digital Addiction. So good to have you here, everybody. Let's just dig a little deeper here for Lisa, for you. Why do you think you became addicted to sugar and carbohydrates?
I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think it was unconscious. I consciously decided that I wasn't going to use drugs and alcohol. And sugar just crept up on me because it's a socially acceptable addiction. It's there when you're a child, you get it as rewards, you give it to your own children as rewards. And then eventually my diagnosis as an addict came when I was really unhealthy and diagnosed with diabetes, and my weight was out of control. And that forced me to actually look into sugar addiction.
Sure.
Where I had to leave a group of cynics behind me when I realized that I was actually addicted to sugar and carbohydrates.
So there's a picture here of you as
I don't consider it a food addiction because sugar and carbs, processed foods, are not really food. So I think there's a distinction for me between food addiction and sugar and carb addiction.
See, Lisa, I have eaten a packet of biscuits before in one go, or a packet of cookies, depending on whether you call them biscuits or cookies, easily, yes. and I've done it several times in my lifetime. Yes. What's the difference between me doing that and being a pig and you being addicted to sugar? How would we know that you were addicted?
Okay, the difference is in our family, some people can have a block or two of chocolate.
Yeah.
I can't. I have to have the whole chocolate.
Yeah.
If I buy the chocolate, I have to eat it. If it's in the house, it's bothering me. If I'm stressed, angry, feeling resentful, I have to have something to eat, and it has to be sweet.
Ah, okay. Phil, tell us about your relationship with your telephone.
Oh, this one.
Oh, okay. He brought it to the show with him. Okay.
No, it's on silent.
Right.
My relationship, well, like most people, it's something that is just always there. It's always in your pocket. If you leave the room, it's probably the first thing that you grab. When you wake up in the morning, it's probably the first thing you look at. You know, there was a study that I heard about last week here in the UK where they said that the majority of people now check Facebook first thing. That's the first thing they do in the morning. I'm not that bad. You know, first thing I tend to do is turn the alarm off and then kind of dig through my emails. Yeah. But you know, I think it's kind of a very common thing that people tend to grab their phone, or you know, like you were just saying a minute ago, those 10 seconds, you'd have grabbed your phone. Yeah. You know, and even if you've not got any messages, even if your phone's not rung, even if it's not vibrated, it's just that fidget factor. And you might not even be doing anything apart from playing with the home screens, you know, swiping back and forth. But it's just a small distraction. It's probably a sign of the times that we get. We have such short attention spans that we get distracted so easily, and we need something to fill those voids.
Well, Femi, in the vein of sharing stories, one of the best things about this is that our community online is also sharing their own stories, what led them to addiction. This is Harrison Wheeler, who sent us this video via Twitter. Tony, have a listen to this.
Hey everyone, Harrison Wheeler here. Happy to contribute to the conversation. I'm a cartoonist and comedian, advocate for mental health. Basically, it was my mania that contributed to my addiction, or that spawned my addiction. I was manic for many, many years, in an extremely creative state. It was only until I found marijuana that I was able to slow my thoughts down. And unfortunately, that spiraled me into an addiction to pot.
So Tony, I'd venture to say you've heard stories like this. How do you go about telling your own story?
Sure. I think in regard to my own story, I do have trauma in my early days, you know, and somehow that led me into the path of addiction as well, because that does help me to deal with the distress that I have to go through. So it's quite relevant that, you know, people with mental health situation, they tend to kind of go into the path of addiction quite easily. But I always suggest that it's not just using drugs that will resolve the problem. I mean, it's a quick fix. It does show result pretty fast, but there are proper medication to deal with those distress or mental health issues.
See, Judson, if you could look at my brain and Tony's brain, Lisa's and Phil's brain, would you be looking for something in particular? So, you know, I've eaten a lot of cakes and, you know, biscuits and chocolate in my time, but I didn't feel that I was addicted. Lisa definitely felt she was. Phil has a very close relationship with his telephone. And Tony had gambling and substance abuse issues. Is there something that you would be looking for in our brains that explains all each of our behaviors?
Yeah, there's a common neural pathway that's related to dopamine. It's a neurotransmitter called dopamine that gets released when we eat sugar in particular. It gets released when we smoke crack cocaine, when we smoke cigarettes, when we get a hit or a tweet that's unexpected. This relates to our learning pathways. It was actually set up evolutionarily so we'd remember where food is. So that's what I would be looking for, is to see those reward pathways being lit up, whether it's eating sugar or you know, checking your Facebook feed.
Sure. Let me show you this here then on my laptop, and you can lean forward, Judson, and then tell us what we're seeing. So we have this brain here, and then we've got brain on cocaine, and then brain that's obese. What's the difference? Apart from the normal one's seems to have more colours going on here, and
Well, yes,
I'd
have to see what this study was in particular, but I'm going to guess this is a PET scan, which means that folks are looking at the amount of dopamine binding in these in the ventral and dorsal striatum, which is a part of the brain that's linked to the dopaminergic circuit. So
I was just going to say that, Judson. Exactly those words, yes.
Great.
All right. Phil, do you get any sense of what's going on in your brain when you're literally that attached to your telephone? Do you feel that something is making you feel better, or are you missing that link?
No, I mean, I don't think there's a physical... well, obviously there is, but it's very subtle. It's not like, you know, the sugar addiction where you probably get a hit, or if you're an alcoholic or a drug abuser and you get that instant hit. But obviously, you know, you get a nice message out of the blue from somebody. It's going to make you kind of feel good about yourself in the same way that if you get a horrible message from a stranger, you know, you're probably going to feel a little not too happy. But I don't think there's no kind of immediate euphoria.
Sure.
You know, but there, I mean, there is a positive feeling when you get something randomly sent to you that is pleasant.
Well, this is how one person online describes those positive feelings that you get. This is Michael, and he says, more information stimulus means more cognitive drain and less ability to self-regulate. These intrusions encourage addiction, and I'd say the intrusions could be these distractions. Lisa, when you see a tweet like this, he talks about not being able to self-regulate. Did you find that true for yourself?
Yes,
did you think there was a point where you could stop yourself?
No, I did think that I could stop myself, and then you actually only realize that you can't once you're in the cycle, and once you're going through the shame and the regret and the guilt of having done it. I recently watched Judson's TED Talk, and that I learned so much from that this week, that I was so conscious about reaching out for my phone and being curious, what's driving me? What's making me pick up my phone every 3 minutes? And it's almost as if one addiction replaces the other. So it's very complicated. But it becomes more simplified when your awareness is raised about when and what you're doing, what your cravings are, what your trigger is, and what's happening to you physically at the time that you actually reach out. So,
Lisa, I think you've said it really nicely, because part of this is that if we're trying to control a behavior, that's the youngest part of our brain is involved in that, the prefrontal cortex, and that's the same part of the brain that kind of goes offline when we get stressed out. So it doesn't work so well at helping us regulate our behavior. And I think that you're describing it very nicely. So when we can start to become more aware of what's actually happening, we can see that these are just physical sensations that are kind of driving us to reach for our phone or to reach for the cookie.
But also, when that's taken away, sorry to interrupt, also when that's taken away from you, there is a certain amount of feeling. I have lost count of the amount of times that people have told me that they've felt panicky or removed from reality if they've left the house in the morning and they've forgotten to take their phone with them, or if their battery dies when they're out and there's no way of recharging it, and people get fidgety. There's a term for it. It's called nomophobia, where you actually get you start to get slightly fearful that because you've got fear of missing out. And I think so that may be related to this dopamine thing, in the same way that you have the extreme positive, you also have the extreme negative.
What do you think the difference is between being addicted to a substance and then being addicted to a behavior? Because we often see people thinking, oh, they might drink a lot, they might take drugs, but I like to shop. Not me personally, I hate shopping, but people love to shop, okay? What's the difference there, and is one more dangerous than another? Tony?
I think what's common in both is there's a level of stimulation. Let's say for substance is when you ingest the drugs and the alcohol, you get that reward system activated. But before that, when you were even planning to consume, there's a level of kind of like dopamine activities happening. And it's the same with process addiction. Process addiction is about the mind being kind of like stimulated, the planning. In terms of my own journey, even today when I watch a sport events going on, automatically I goes into looking like what is the bet, how much I can win if I were to be engaging in that activity. I can't control that, but what is happening is that I'm aware. That awareness is important, because that's where I can do something about that. When I'm in active addiction, like Judson is saying, my prefrontal cortex is not functioning. But when I stop acting out, it's actually sending me some level of signal or awareness so that I can do something about that. So in substance and even with process, we just need to be aware of that we have been triggered and what can we do now. That is really critical. Even for myself today.
If I can just cut in there. Well, for me, I don't see a difference between substance abuse and behavior. Addiction is addiction. And in my personal experience, for most addicts, the ones that I know, the ones that we work with in our group, there's always a woundedness for people. So it's always coming from somewhere. So Tony spoke earlier about having some trauma. And I always joke about having problems with my weight for the last 20 years. But in the last, between my 20s and 30s, I probably had the most trauma in my life. And they just kept coming. There was 6 or 7 major events, life-changing events.
Lisa, do you mind sharing them with us? Because I'm sure there are people still watching going, how on earth can she be addicted to sugar and carbohydrates? Doesn't everybody love those? So let's
get that a lot.
Yeah, let's unpack this a little bit more, because when you say trauma, and then some, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, please share with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. So when I was younger, 6 weeks after I had my first son, my dad died at 49, a chronic diabetic. And 2 years later, I was pregnant with my second son, and my husband was killed in a car accident along with two of our friends. My son was born 5 years later. I remarried, and I then had a daughter. When she was 3 months old, my second son had a massive stroke. So his life was threatened. He now is disabled and has cerebral palsy. It's actually had a positive impact on his life. And 2 years later, he had another stroke. So it was there were so many different incidents, and I just kept going because I just thought I have to be strong for my unborn baby, I have to be strong for my family. And then when I had my last two children, I actually developed gestational diabetes during my pregnancies. There were no signs for me that it could be related to what I was eating. And most of the time I was following a low-fat, high-carb eating plan. So when I had gestational diabetes, one day I went to the doctor and he did a glucose test, and my glucose was 16 after I'd had a fat-free smoothie and something in them. So I was hospitalized for that. So I think...
So it took you all of that time to realise that actually it wasn't all of these, to make the link between all of the traumatic things that were happening to you and how you responded to it.
Sadly, it didn't even make sense then. My fourth child is 10 years old.
Yeah.
And only 3 years ago, when I got really sick and went to the doctor, I had to explore
That's when you realised
how to fix my health.
Sure.
And I had to stop focusing on losing weight and start looking at being healthy.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
You know,
we
hear that really powerful story, and online people are now debating whether or not these addictions come from being an illness, being something that's in our minds vis-a-vis willpower. It's an interesting discussion here that I want to bring up. This is one person whose Twitter handle is Rethink Gambling. And they say to be a gambling addict, you need significant willpower to continue in the face of negative consequences. On the other hand, there's a tweet here from Epic Gambling Risk, that's that handle, who says this is clearly an illness. If it wasn't an illness, why would anyone gamble problematically? Tony, do you want to take that on?
Sure. I believe it's a illness, it's a disease. I mean, that's what I always been believing, because there are times when I'm gambling against my own will. You know, I could have incurred severe losses. I would kind of like, you know, start cheating, lying to get money in order to feed my so-called gambling habit. But I realized one thing is that I have no control. That obsession is just insane, is going on in my head. So after I got so-called treatment and get into recovery with the 12-step group, that's where I learned about this disease model. And it does make a lot of sense, because a lot of times I'm gamble to feel normal. And this is where the malfunction reward system in my brain is so-called creating all this chaos. So personally, that is how I kind of like agree on. It's definitely a disease. No, and that's what we have been also doing in terms of my current work. You know, we always focus on that disease model.
Yeah, I think you describe it nicely where you're saying gambling to feel normal, because there's this abnormal feeling where we don't feel right,
Sure.
Whether it's feeling restless without our phone or seeing a sports game where, you know, we have this urge to gamble and we're suddenly locked into this automatic behavior where we start thinking, and we're completely out of control. I think you've described it very nicely.
Justin, I watched a video of yours called A Simple Way to Break a Habit or a Bad Habit. What's the simple way? I know people watching this will be thinking, I could do with watching that video. How do you do that? How do you break the bad habits?
I think you're referring to the TED Talk that I recently gave.
Yeah.
Basically, if we can really understand how these habits are formed, then that's the first step in learning to break them. So if we can understand that we set up habits through, you know, a trigger, a behavior, and reward, and that gets set up, whether it's eating chocolate to feel better, you know, for example, with carbohydrate addiction, for example, or gambling to feel normal, as Tony's talking about, that's the reward pathway that gets set up. And if you smoke, for example, you're rewarding, and you smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, you're doing this 20 times a day. So this can happen over and over and over throughout the day. So if we can understand what that pathway is, we can start to target it. And what we've been studying here at the Center for Mindfulness is how to use basically simple ways of bringing our attention to whatever's happening in our bodies to help break that loop. So if we can notice that what the urges feel like to gamble or to eat chocolate or to smoke a cigarette, we can start to see that these are just body sensations. You know, it's tightness, it's tension, it's burning. These are physical sensations that are literally driving our lives. And if we can see that and we can be aware of it, we can step out of the process and we can let go of them. And that's basically what mindfulness is about.
Sure. And Judson, for some people, they say that the best way to bring attention to that is to have peer-to-peer counseling, really. There's a couple people saying that same thing. This is Kirst on Twitter. She says, without Alcoholics Anonymous, I wouldn't be 12 days sober. Support groups are the most important part of recovery. We also got a video comment from a doctor. This is Jennifer, and this is what she had to say. And Lisa, I'll direct this to you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jennifer Weeks, and I'm a psychologist specializing in the treatment of sexual addiction. I just wanted to chime in on this topic of peer support in addiction recovery. I think it's critical for people in recovery from addictions connect with others. It gives them a sense of connection. It teaches them how to have emotional intimacy and to be vulnerable, which is critical. Creating real connection moves people forward in their sobriety.
Lisa, how critical was it for you?
It was critical because, you know, you can't trust the self-help book because you're there. You need to be in a group, sharing ideas, sharing feelings, sharing experiences with other people. And for me, being in that group, you actually feel so normal. And a lot of people have been through so much trauma that it doesn't make your trauma, it doesn't minimize your trauma, but it just, there's some solidarity in the group and there's some understanding. So people support you, they act as a partner, they role model. It's very, very important to be in a group.
Lisa, you know when you're talking, do you know what Phil's doing right now? Phil's doing... Phil, I'm throwing Phil under the bus. Phil was doing this, right? I have no idea what he could be doing. I'm sure he's being extremely mindful of the conversation. Right, Phil? What are you doing? It's a TV show, Phil. You're not scratching your leg. You're texting on your leg. You're doing something.
I just want to say to Phil how much I enjoyed watching that documentary.
Yeah.
I sat for the first 5 minutes. I was so irritated because your friends are my friends, and I'm just like, leave me alone. I'm just having a little look, you know. And actually, by the end of it, I felt so connected to you because you went to do that course, and it was like lots of kumbaya and peace on earth, and we don't need technology. And by the end of it, you said, well, I'm recovering, you know, it's something that you're trying to do. But actually, I've stopped being that attached to my phone this week since watching you and Judson. So I think it makes a big difference if you just really do become mindful.
Yeah.
Forgetting my phone in the car today was the first in probably 5 months.
Yeah.
So thanks for that.
So let me just show you this picture here, Judson. And this picture is our brain and how sort of the rural parts of our brain actually work. How do we beat our brain? I mean, that's what we need to do. Is we need to kind of like fake out our brain a little bit so we don't get hooked on things that make us feel good.
I don't know if we need to fake it out. I think we can actually tap into the reward-based learning system itself. So, for example, if we can tap into our natural curiosity actually feels good. And it might not be the same type of feeling good as dopamine. I don't know if that's the case or not. But curiosity itself can be a learned behavior. So if we, or I should say reinforced, if you look at children, they're really good at being curious. And so if we, you know, if we have a craving, for example, and cravings are uncomfortable, so we want to push them away. Yeah. And instead of pushing it away, it paradoxically turn toward that craving and say, well, what's this actually feel like in my body? And get curious. That unpleasant feeling can switch into a pleasant tone of curiosity.
What does this ice cream feel like in my body? It feels fantastic. That can work for everybody. All right. So Judson and Tony and Lisa and Phil, so much more to talk about, which is why we have a post show. We're going online, and hopefully you audience can come with us. stream.aljazeera.com. See you soon. Take care, everybody. Hello again, it's good to have you back here. We're talking about the psychology of addiction and how we kind of beat these compulsive behaviours that we all pick up from time to time. Tony, the way Judson explained it, it seemed really simple. It's like, just be really aware of what's going on and then like embrace it. And I was like, well, that's fine if it's shopping, but what if it's, you know, crack or alcohol?
It's not that easy, to be honest. I mean, I would like to back up what Lisa has said earlier. The group therapy is really important because it's a form of like belonging. So going back to what Judson was saying, is breaking that habit. And trust me, it's not that simple. I mean, my personal journey, I got into recovery. And when I stopped acting out both on drugs, substance, alcohol, or even gambling, my life suddenly has no meaning at all. You know, I'm doing whatever I have been taught, you know, like aware of the trigger, putting into coping mechanism, but it just don't function that way. I don't feel normal at all because one thing is lacking. I don't feel that I belong. Remember, when I'm acting out or using drugs, I feel that I belong to that. But when you take that away from me, that belonging is gone. And that belonging comes after I got into groups. You know, I was doing group therapy in a treatment center, and that really changed my life because suddenly I feel that I'm normal. I belong to something called recovery, and that is really makes a big difference. I mean, even today, I'm still attending support groups to continue to support me and be aware, you know, of the addicts in me. Because I would like to quote the ASAM definition of addiction. I mean, it's something that I believe that I'm predisposed because that was in my family. Gambling is a big part of our family activities. So initially I thought it was something pretty normal. But when I got into addiction, I realized it's not normal at all. And when I got into recovery, that was a disaster because something was changing. You know, I don't feel like a functioning person because the big part of my life, I don't feel rewarded at all. So it's not about learning how to reward myself in a healthy way because that will come later. But one thing that really helps me is when I was in the support group, that helped me to find a sense of belonging. That is a big reward because for once in my life, you know, that really means something to me. Okay, because big part of my life, you know, like I mentioned, I have trauma issue and things like that. I don't feel that I'm a normal person. I don't fit into anything. And gambling or acting out on drugs allow me not to feel those feelings, which is serving a purpose. And that's how I become addicted. So remember, I mean, I agree that we need to learn behavior to change, you know, to replace what we do in active addiction. But don't forget, being in a group, that really helped me to identify with a lot of other people who are going through the same process with me. And that really helped. You know, I believe like Phil, who's been to treatment for his addiction, that really makes a big difference, I reckon.
Right. And Tony, the first part of what you were saying, what you were saying, Tony, about finding what it is you're addicted to and replacing that is one that a few people online have recommended. This is Kevin. He says you have to find that trigger or the pleasure and replace it. So for someone else online, this is what they did. This is Harrison, who you heard from in a video earlier. He is now an artist and takes to drawing. You can see this one. It says, "Why bother?" And someone's trying to go out into the blue sunlight, but there is something holding him back. This is the avenue that he took to. Phil, I know you were trying to get in. Did you find yourself having to find another avenue, or do you continually look at your phone?
I do continually look on my phone, yeah. But I mean, the problem is, the thing is, when I first left that camp, it was just outside San Francisco, and of course there's an 8-hour time difference between London and California. So I remember thinking, you know, it's the middle of the night back home. Nobody's going to be trying to get hold of me, so I'm going to leave this off for several more hours because I know as soon as I turn this device back on, I'm going to be inundated with days of missed calls, emails, and all the rest of it. And there was something really peaceful and nice about that. But the reality is that I have a job where I have to be actioning emails. You know, I'm currently setting up some stories in the States, and I'm dealing with an 8-hour time difference. So when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is reach for my phone to see what emails I've had overnight, and I quickly try to reply to them before the guys in California go to bed. And that's kind of, that's my justification for it. But what I did do was I disabled Facebook notifications on my phone because they were always going off. And the first thing they do is they encourage you to pick up your phone and see what somebody has said. And that is much more relaxing because I check it on my terms. I still have Twitter because I use that for work, so I'm waiting for people to respond to things, and my personal email. But I feel a little less pulled into it because I did something as simple as disabling Facebook on my phone.
Judson, just occurred to me, what are you addicted to? What are those compulsive behaviours where you're like, oh, I shouldn't really be doing this. I need to watch my TEDx talk.
Yeah, how long do you have?
Yeah, dish. What do you have? Name one.
Thinking. Thinking is a great addiction that I can easily get lost in.
You're cheating.
No,
We're all
actually,
addicted to thinking.
I'm writing a a right now, and I have a whole chapter on how thinking can be addictive. So I think it falls into the same category, whether it's distraction or daydreaming or whatnot.
Judson, are you sure? You don't like, Twiglets or, peanut cups or something where it's just your weakness. I feel like you have to have an Achilles heel somewhere.
And there are certain foods that I absolutely love, and ice cream is one of them. Absolutely.
All right. Okay. We'll just be very mindful about that ice cream. Judson, Tony, Lisa, and Phil, it's really been fascinating because we've been talking about behaviours and substance and things that we're compelled to do, and a whole broad spectrum of addictions or behaving. And it's been really interesting hearing it from some that are very deeply, deeply serious to some that we all actually share. So thank you so much. It's been an education listening to you. Judson and Tony and Lisa and Phil and Phil's phone. Thanks for being on the stream today. Appreciate it.